Welcome back to another Bella's Blades video. Today we're not actually doing a review, but instead I thought I'd walk you through a modification project that I have planned for this knife, which is the Spyderco Manix 2 XL. So a couple things that I'm kind of wanting to try out here. And of course, you know, this is the kind of stuff that definitely is probably going to destroy any resale value I might have on the knife. But since I'm not planning on ever selling the knife, I kind of wanted to personalize it and do something a little different than what everybody else might have. So my initial thoughts here, and we'll see how this takes shape, is I want to reprofile this blade. It's got the real wide leaf shaped blade. I want to maybe make that a little bit closer to kind of like the Paramilitary 2 style, with not quite so thick or wide of a blade. I don't want to narrow it down too much because with it being a bigger knife, you know, I still want it to be able to stand up to some harder use. So I don't want to get rid of some of the integrity of the blade, but maybe just bring down a little bit, take a little bit off the back of this thing to make that blade a little narrower in shape. And then I'm thinking about doing a acid wash and a type of stone wash that I've never tried before, and we're going to see how that turns out before I get into it too much. If it doesn't pan out, I may have to change course. So basically, I'd be darkening this blade with kind of a stone wash finish, then acid, and then stone wash. The one thing I haven't quite decided yet is whether I want to do anything with this polished belt clip, or pocket clip, I should say. The pocket clip, again, I'm going to have a dark blade, and then a shiny or polished pocket clip. I'm not sure how well those two go together, but my concern is that I am definitely not planning on doing anything with these liners. I don't want to acid wash or stone wash these. So since I'm going to have these kind of shiny stainless steel liners, I don't know that I want, and the screws as well, I wasn't really considering doing anything with either. So I'm already going to have some other shiny metal on it. I didn't know if having the blade dark and the pocket clip dark would be a better option, or to leave everything else with the stainless look except for the blade. So that's something I'm kind of figuring out as I go. I think I'm going to reprofile the blade first, see what that looks like, and then do the acid wash and the stone wash and see how that turns out. And then I can always do the pocket clip later, if I decide I want to do that. So we're going to see how this goes, guys. I'm kind of playing it by ear as I go, but I wanted to kind of walk you through the process, or the thought process that I have, and we're going to see what we end up with, and if I like it any better when I'm done, or if I feel like I made a mistake. We'll see. So I finished with the reprofiling of the blade. I feel like that went pretty well. Overall, I think I like the shape a little bit better. It's not a huge difference, but it just comes to a little bit of a sharper point, and not quite so broad on the back. Kind of doesn't have that like hump on the back of the blade. So I do like the way that the reprofiling turned out on it. I think that looks pretty nice. Enough so that I'm kind of debating whether I really want to do the acid wash and the stone wash on it or not. I think I'm going to, though. I kind of committed to it, so I want to see what it turns out like. The one thing that I am going to kind of regret about the acid wash is I'm going to lose the Golden Colorado on this side. I'm assuming I'm going to lose the Spyderco logo and the CPM S30V Spyderco. Basically, all the writing that's on the blade is probably going to get lost in the acid etch. But to the plus side, some of these scratches and stuff that I have on the blade, I might be able to kind of get rid of or mask those. But overall, as far as the actual reprofile went, of course, I don't have it on the knife right now because I tore the knife apart to be able to work on the blade. And knowing that I'm going to need to also do the acid wash, you know, so I need the blade separate. Basically, what I'll do is when I'm going to wash this, I'm going to do it in a mixture of muriatic acid and hydrogen peroxide. And so I'll clean this up really good with acetone first, and then I will use like nail polish or something as a resist around the pivot area and basically everywhere that needs to be kind of polished for smooth action on the knife. So in essence, everything from here down, this whole section here, I will probably have completely covered with a resist so that the acid does not affect any of that. And then the rest of the blade will be acid washed. and we'll see what that turns out like. So we'll check back in. So far, I'm liking the progress. Okay, so we're outside and I'm getting ready to mix up my etchant. I'm doing it outside for a couple reasons. One, because fumes, hoping that that'll be less of a problem here. I probably should be wearing a respirator just to be safe, but it's really hard to talk the respirator on and be able to understand. So I think I'll be all right out here with the breeze blowing and everything. So what we're going to be using to make our etchant is going to be muriatic acid, which is some pretty nasty stuff. This is 31.45% concentration. And then we're going to be mixing that with some hydrogen peroxide. This is 3%. You can get stronger stuff at like a cosmetic or beauty store, but I think the 3% will be fine for what we need. Safety equipment, I am going to be wearing gloves, long sleeves. I've got safety goggles on as well as a face shield. And we do have some Windex just for quick neutralization should that be necessary. So right now I've got my nail polish drying on the blade. So I figured while I did that, I could go ahead and mix up my etchant. You can see I'm using a glass mason jar. Important part, I'm using a plastic lid, not a metal lid. The other reason that we're doing this outside is because the muriatic acid will rust any metal that's in the vicinity just from the vapors. So I really don't want this stuff in my shop. So we're just going to do it outside here and mix this up. So it's always important to, when you're mixing acid, and I am not a chemist, so I would not recommend necessarily repeating what I'm doing because I'm not claiming to be an expert. But I do know that it's always important when you are mixing acid that you always pour the acid into water and not the other way around. Now, in this case, the hydrogen peroxide is our substitute for our water. So we're going to go ahead and fill this up. I'm going to do roughly halfway with our hydrogen peroxide. And then I'm going to go ahead and put on my gloves just in case there's any splashing. I don't want this stuff on my hands. Now I'm using vinyl gloves because it's what I have. They're not necessarily the best, but from a small splash, they should be sufficient to protect. So we're going to go ahead and slowly add our acid. That's going to be good right there. And now what we'll do is once my nail polish is done drying, we'll go ahead and start etching the blade. All right, we're ready to go ahead and try and put this in the acid. And we will leave it in there for a few minutes at a time, and we'll see what happens. All right, so you can see here that I've sped up the video by like 16 times. That's because, honestly, watching acid etch is about as fun as watching paint dry. And this ended up taking much, much longer than I thought. I thought it would take 5 to 10 minutes, and it ended up being more like 30 minutes. Now, part of that was because of something I wasn't aware of. You see here in the video that I did pull it out and check the color a couple times, and it never seemed to be getting any darker. I came to find out that that's because it seems like when the acid etches it, the steel that it's etching off kind of like stays on the outside of the blade, and it leaves kind of this matte gray look. but when you wipe that off, it's dark underneath. So if I would recommend, if you're doing this and you want to check the color, when you pull it out of the acid, spray it down with Windex and wipe it off, and you'll get rid of all that kind of matte gray, like light gray on the outside, and it'll allow you to see what the actual color is underneath. This actually turned out much darker than it looks here in this part of the video, and you'll see that here at the finished product in a minute. So you're also going to see here that I bring in a kind of a pan of water here. That's because I had heard that if you take the blade directly out of the acid and put it into almost boiling water, really hot water, it'll help set the color. I don't know whether that's true or not, but I figured it didn't hurt to try it. So, and then I just figured that once I put it in the hot water after it had been there for a minute or two, I could dump in the baking soda to help neutralize the acid, which I did. And then after it set in the water with the baking soda for a while, I still sprayed it down with Windex and washed it, and then sprayed it down and washed it multiple times to make sure that I had fully neutralized the acid, and that it was good to go. So anyway, guys, this ended up taking, like I said, about 30 minutes, and you'll see here the end result in just a minute. All right, guys, after taking the knife out of the acid and cleaning it up real good and making sure I neutralized it real good, I went ahead and tumbled it in brass casings. So in case you're wondering what that process looks like, since I didn't actually video it, really wouldn't have been anything to video. I just got a plastic jar with a lid and filled it with, I don't know, probably about 50 or so, maybe, 9mm empty shell casings. Spray some WD-40 in there. So again, that's all that is. Spray some WD-40 in there, put the blade in, and then I actually put it in the dryer rather than do it by hand, so it'd be more uniform and maybe not as taxing on me. And I actually duct taped the whole canister to the wall of the drum of the dryer so that it was just what was inside the container that was tumbling and not the jar itself bouncing around in the dryer. It makes it not sound so bad, as well as I think gives probably a more uniform finish. Additionally, I did wrap it in a towel before I did that, just to make sure in case any oil leaked or anything, it wasn't all over my dryer. But that's basically the process, and I'm going to show you guys what it turned out like. And I got to say, I'm really, really pleased with this, guys. So this is the end result. Now, the one thing I will say is when I was putting on the resist, obviously the blade was not on the knife. So I had to kind of guess where exactly the handle scales would land. You can see I didn't nail it perfectly, but I'm pretty pleased with what I did get, because right there, you can see just a little bit of the silver plain edge blade where the resist was, but because it kind of almost perfectly matches the curve of the knife there, it's not all that noticeable when it's closed, but when it's open, obviously you can't see anything there. So, and you can see what that finish turned out like. I really think it looks good. I guess each person, will have their own ideas on that. Obviously, I had to resharpen the edge after acid washing it and tumbling it in the brass. And I might actually smooth this edge up a little bit better. I didn't polish it super high polish or anything. I just wanted to get an edge on it here for the review. But the one thing that I will say is the pocket clip. I kept it in the acid the same amount of time, and I tumbled it in the brass the same amount of time, and you can see the difference there. The brass didn't really show at all, and it's this kind of light gray color, which I still think works a lot better than it would have with the mirror polished finish on it. But it clearly doesn't match exactly to the blade. I wish that it had gotten at the very least a little darker. My thought is maybe because of the mirror polish is what caused that. So I'm thinking maybe if I had roughed it up with some sandpaper first, possibly if I left it in the acid a little longer, I'm not sure. I might have gotten that a little darker, but maybe not, because it is a different steel. It's not the same type of steel as the blade, so maybe it reacts differently to the acid. Either way, I think it turned out okay. I mean, it doesn't really bother me that it's not a perfect match. I definitely think it looks better with the kind of the flat gray look than it would have with the shiny mirror polish finish. The other thing I want to point out is the redesign on the blade shape here. I really love how that turned out as well. Basically, I took a blade that was the Manix 2 style and turned it into more of a paramilitary 2 style. And to kind of show you what I mean by that, here's a regular Manix 2, and you can kind of see that blade shape there. And then here's the paramilitary 2. And you can definitely tell that this blade now favors the paramilitary 2 style more than it does the Manix 2. And because I've kind of got a gray background here, I'm going to, which makes it harder to see the knife I just modified, I'm going to go ahead and pause this for a minute, swap out for a white background so you can see it a little better. So you can see there that, I mean, I think that helps you see the blade shape better, not necessarily the detail of the knife overall, but you can definitely tell that the blade favors more the paramilitary 2 style blade shape than the traditional Manix style, which is up here. And I really do like this blade shape a whole lot better than the original. So I'm going to go ahead and swap this background back out, but I think that lets you see the shape of the blade just a little bit better up against the white background. All right, so guys, as far as overall, like I said, man, I'm very, very pleased with the way that turned out. And it's hard to tell. The lighting's not the best in here, so I'm trying to get it to kind of catch the light so you can see that brass against the dark on the acid wash. But in like real life here, as I'm looking at it, I think it looks really, really cool. And yeah, some of that brass, just so anybody knows, that brass is going to wear off with use. And then you're going to end up with more just a traditional stonewash finish. But you know, if it really bothers you and you don't want to have just the regular stonewash finish, you can always tumble it again and kind of get that same look. But it'll last for quite a while before it wears off. Overall, really pleased with the modifications on this knife and how everything turned out. Tell me what you think. You know, I guess all that matters is that I like it. Obviously, it's my knife, but I'm just curious to see what everybody else thinks about this modification. Would you do something like this if you have a Manix 2XL? Is this something you would consider doing? And, you know, kind of separately, as far as what do you think about the blade shape versus the acid wash and the brass tumble that was done there as well? And is it something that you would do to your knife? So sound off, let me know what you think. Like I said, I'm pretty pleased with it. If you guys are enjoying the channel and the content, please like and subscribe. That helps me know that what I'm doing is being watched and that people are enjoying it. Thanks, guys.